The snow fell in slow, almost solemn fragments, covering the small town of Aspen Heights with a delicacy that hid what was about to happen. It was Christmas Eve, and the houses shone in red and gold, full of sparkling decorations, decorated pine trees, and promises of warm nights with family. But, as I know well, not all promises are kept. I am Morticia, and that night I was about to witness a story that stretched beyond the limits of human comprehension. Come with me and follow the fates of Emily, Mark, Luca, and Evelyn, for souls captured by something greater and darker than they could imagine. Emily, a 28-year-old nurse, was the type of person everyone called kind and helpful. Her life revolved around the local hospital, where she treated her patients with the patience of someone who deeply believes in human goodness. She had grown up in the little town of Aspen Heights and, since childhood, had dreamed of Christmas. There was something comforting about the tradition, as if it were a promise of security in a world often chaotic. And that night, she would finally bring her fiancé, Mark, to meet her family. Mark, a 33-year-old engineer, was reserved, with a serious face and a somewhat mysterious personality. He was born in Italy and carried an air of intensity that contrasted with Emily's sweetness. Despite their differences, she found in him a safe harbor. But there was something about Mark that she never fully understood, something in the deep shine of his brown eyes that always made her feel a little distant. On that same Christmas, Luca and Evelyn, Emily's best friends, were also in town. Luca, a 27-year-old Frenchman, was a passionate and somewhat eccentric artist, with curly hair that fell over his eyes and always a brush in his hands. Evelyn, his life and art companion, was delicate and observant, and her talent for capturing the emotions of people made her an exceptional painter. The two had traveled from Paris to spend Christmas with Emily and Mark, but fate had something much beyond what they imagined in store for them. As the night fell, the four friends gathered at Emily's house. Outside, the snowstorm intensified, covering everything with a thick layer of white. Inside the house, the atmosphere was cozy, the Christmas tree lights twinkled with a warm glow, and soft music filled the air. Emily served glasses of wine, while Mark, Evelyn, and Luca chatted, laughing and recalling stories. The night passed with a tranquility that seemed endless, until something disturbing began to manifest. Outside, a sound, an almost imperceptible noise like a distant hum, could be heard. It was a sound that didn't match the cold silence of the snow, something alien, a noise that stood out from anything earthly. Mark, always alert, was the first to hear it and frowned. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his unease growing. Luca laughed, thinking it was just another common sound of the night. "Probably just the wind, my friend. Relax, we're safe here." But Mark's gaze remained fixed, as though he sensed something. He looked at Emily, who was also beginning to feel an odd discomfort. But trying not to ruin the night, she smiled and returned to the living room, trying to ignore that unsettling feeling. Just a few minutes later, the light flickered, casting brief shadows across the room. Evelyn laughed nervously. "Maybe we had too much wine. It seems even the lights are feeling it." But the lights flickered again, and this time the glow returned weaker, a pale, cold light that seemed to absorb the warmth from the room. An absolute silence dominated the environment. It was then that something unusual happened. Everyone's phones began vibrating simultaneously, emitting a sharp sound that seemed to echo inside their heads. The screens flickered, displaying a sequence of strange symbols, like letters none of them recognized. "Emily, what's happening?" whispered Evelyn, clutching her boyfriend's hand. Emily tried to calm the friends, but panic had already settled in. "Maybe it's just a glitch, an overload due to the storm." Mark, however, remained serious. He fixed his eyes on the window and saw something outside. It looked like a light, distant but intense, moving through the snow. He stood up, walked to the window, and stared at what appeared to be a floating sphere of light. Gradually, the light came closer, revealing the silhouette of a strange, metallic structure levitating above the ground, emitting no sound. Mark recoiled, his face pale, as Emily and the others joined him at the window, watching with a mixture of terror and fascination. Is this real?" Luca murmured, his voice trembling. Before anyone could answer, the structure emitted a bluish-green light, enveloping the house. Emily felt a numbness, as if her consciousness was being invaded, an invisible presence settling inside her, forcing her to see images of a distant planet, civilizations of unknown beings, their thoughts mingling with her own. The light stopped, and they all stood still, struggling to process what they had just experienced. Evelyn dropped to her knees, tears streaming down her face, her eyes vacant and dilated. They're here," she whispered, her voice heavy with uncontrollable dread. The front door of the house opened on its own, creaking as if inviting the four to step outside. And, without understanding why, they found themselves compelled to walk toward that alien structure, as if an invisible force was pulling them. The ground was cold, but none of them felt the ice. They were guided by a compulsion they couldn't resist. As they approached the structure, they saw what appeared to be a humanoid figure, with vaguely familiar features, but its eyes were empty, deep as the abyss. The creature emitted a vibration that reverberated through their bones, an unbearable sensation, as if their very essence was being pulled. Emily tried to retreat, but her feet were stuck, as if something was holding her to the ground. Mark, beside her, struggled futilely against the force, unable to even move his arms. Evelyn and Lucas screamed, but the sounds were muffled, as if the noise was being absorbed by the structure. And then the images began. Emily saw her childhood, her moments of joy, her most cherished memories being torn away, devoured by the entity. She saw Mark being pulled by another light, and felt the pain of his essence fracturing. He looked at her, trying to say something, but his face was frozen in an expression of absolute terror. "They're using us as fuel," Mark whispered, as a pale shadow left his body, a light consumed by the structure feeding it. Luca and Evelyn tried to embrace, but were separated by an invisible force that threw them to the ground. The creature approached Luca, studying him with an intensity that seemed to penetrate his soul. He screamed, but soon the light left his eyes, and he lay still, nothing more than an empty shell. In the end, only Emily remained with her consciousness intact. She was alone, surrounded by the lifeless bodies of her friends, as the creature studied her with morbid curiosity. She felt the deep, inescapable connection, as if the creature were absorbing every thought, every fear, every dream she had ever had. "Please, let me go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But the entity only tilted its head, observing her, like a scientist watching an experiment. She realized it was a game, an alien obsession that fed on human emotions, that found pleasure in seeing fear, despair, love, and pain. With a final flicker of consciousness, she saw Christmas disappearing, every happy memory being undone, every feeling of joy consumed by that presence. And as her vision faded to black, she knew that nothing would remain of her except the echo of a silent scream, lost forever in the infinite space. And so, I followed them as their souls drained away, as the mysterious structure vanished into the sky, taking with it what was left of those who had once believed in love and friendship.